Hello and welcome to Global Sanctuary for Elephants podcast, Global Rumblings. Global Sanctuary for Elephants, or GSE for short, is a non-profit organization with a mission to create vast safe spaces for captive elephants where they are able to heal physically and emotionally, often from very traumatic pasts. I'm your host, Nadia Mari, and I'll be taking you to the lush jungle of the Mato Grosso region in central Brazil, home of GSE's initial project, Elephant Sanctuary Brazil. Currently home to 6 female Asian elephants, lovingly referred to as the girls. Hi, welcome, and thank you for joining us this week for a new episode of Global Rumblings. We are still talking about Ramba, Chile's last circus elephant. So let's head on over to Brazil and say hi to Kat and Scott. Hi, you two.
Hey, Nadia.
Hey, Nadia. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Still coming to terms with the fact that the year is nearly over, although we do still have a few weeks. And I have bought my first calendar, my 2024 GSE calendar. So I'm still waiting for that to arrive.
I hear they're beautiful.
Yeah, I've seen lots of photos on the Facebook group. I've actually bought 2, one for myself and one as a Christmas present. So I've also got, my first Christmas present.
Perfect. That makes it easy.
Which is good. And we do have in our last episode, we talked about your new online shop, your lovely merchandise shop. And I am excited to say that we have come together and we have got a wonderful, super cool podcast mug. We will definitely be linking up in the show notes to that. It's 2 colors. It's got a black handle. It's black inside, and Sip, Rumble, Repeat is printed on it. And also our lovely podcast logo. So yeah, next time we start being more serious about our drinking game or our bingo game.
We can't do that. We can't play. We still have elephants to take care of after podcasts. We can't start doing that.
Oh, you still got... Well, we'll just do bingo. So the words are beautiful, amazing, and nuances. I think we'll have to add fantastic to that as well. But we had the 3 words. I digress a little bit. I definitely need one of these podcast mugs so we can say cheers. Last week, our last episode, we ended on a slightly frustrating note, which I must apologize. That wasn't my intention to frustrate you. But unfortunately, the paperwork and everything else involved with Ramba did take a long time. So we left her at the Parque Safari. She still is at the Parque Safari in Chile. She's got a dedicated care team that you will have helped train. Maybe we can summarize 6 or 7 years in this podcast before she finally was rescued and came to you in 2019. So what happened?
Well, don't worry about the frustration of the questions. We've always said we're open to any question. And, some of them are frustrating to think about and go back to. And I was just talking to somebody the other day. She, one of the caregivers came up and said, I just wanted to say how much she appreciates the opportunity that was created by letting her work here and contracting with her, and how much of a difference it's already made on her life and how much she's already changed in the last year. And we talked a lot about, it's not always easy. Nothing is. And there's that balance, between the joy and the frustration. And, if it was all joy and wonderful, then everybody want to be here all the time. But, there is a balance in life with everything. And there's the good and the bad, and the joy and the frustration. And sometimes the joy compounded or contrasted by the really difficult sadness at times. So it's all the balance. So don't worry about the frustrating question. It's all part of the balance of sanctuary.
I was going to say, I'm sure there's going to be more than one of them, so it's all good.
Yeah. So back to Chile. Back in Chile, we had caregivers that were hired. We had Ramba, who's actually doing pretty well. At the time, she was adapting pretty well. And then things were pretty stable until we found out that she wasn't going to be able to go to the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee. I don't remember if we talked about that or not. Mm-hmm. And I think after that, it became a little bit more complicated because now we're having to, figure out what we can do to expedite sanctuary development here. And in that process, while also focusing so much time here, Kat pretty much managing daily activities with Ramba, and the caregivers, and what they're seeing with her health issues and foot issues in training, and then the issues with sometimes the water being cut off, or sometimes the power being cut off, or sometimes the heater not working, and all these things that just come along with elephant management, but elephant management in a facility that is not fully embracing the process. I think it was also, in fairness to the Parque Safari, although some pretty crazy things were done that lacked professionalism and lacked maturity and lacked ethics, to balance that out a little bit, they also were not put in a great scenario with what they thought was going to be versus what was. They invested the time. They were thinking 6 months to a year, and then it's 1 year passes, 2 years pass, 3 years pass, 4 years pass, and they're still not supposed to be doing anything with her in terms of fundraising or advertising or photos or really having her on display. So they ended up developing some tours around her, and I think what would have happened if she was there or not, with the Dinosaur tour. But it happened to be that when they did the Dinosaur tour, the Jurassic Park tour with these animated dinosaurs, they would have to go past Ramba and invade her space a little bit more, which created...
What's a dinosaur tour?
You can explain. I'm looking at a cat. It is... They did a Jurassic Park type display with, life-size to scale dinosaurs, mostly to scale dinosaurs.
You think?
Probably a little small.
I don't know
how
how
big
big a
they are.
dinosaur is. I've never
Quite
seen one in
large,
person.
quite large fake dinosaurs, animated, and their tails wag, and sometimes their heads move, and they make a lot of noise with this incredible soundtrack that they had of Jurassic Park music combined with the roaring and rumbling, and
I think it repeated like...
Oh, that was that noise that we heard.
Yeah, it repeated like
I remember now.
on a loop every minute or so. It was just
and the sirens going off when
terrible.
Security has been breached, and
Yes, because the dinosaurs had escaped, and it was just this. And the two brontosaurus were, maybe 20 yards? They were how you entered this short little tour, and they were like maybe 20 yards from the one side of Ramba's yard, and they had these little safari trucks with cages that they would drive by with like 12, 15, 20 people in them, and they would go through and just drive into the bushes, and in the bushes were all these...
I remember when we had posting photos of Ramba with the Brontosaurus heads behind him, was like, what's going on? And what is this all about? People used to comment on the Brontosaurus in the background, and sometimes in the videos.
It must have been so noisy for all the other animals as well. I mean, apart from Ramba, the noise pollution, literally. I'm ranting every morning on the weekends because my neighbour, bless him, I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast, is a fervent fan of a leaf blower. And I'm like thinking, what the bleep? What happened to rakes, brooms and good old elbow grease? Oh gosh, so that must have been an absolute nightmare, the noise.
There's a documentary coming out next year that we're really excited about. It's about Ramba. And in the documentary, you can actually get a feel for what it was like there. And it's one of the things that the documentarians wanted to show is what was the contrast between before and after Sanctuary. And it really gave a pretty stark comparison between the two. And you can see at one point when we go into, it was just after the last tour and before the zoo staff came to turn off the music, because sometimes they would wait a while. And as soon as the last tour was done, we're like, no, we're going in and we're going to find the cutoff switch because it is so obnoxiously loud. And you can get a sense for when that audio is turned off. It's like everybody, the cameraman sighs, we all sigh. It's like you can finally breathe for the first time. And it's so obnoxious, Nadia. It was just, and for elephant, we all know their sensitivity with their hearing and their sensitivity with vibrations in their feet. And I can't imagine what that was like for her. I really cannot fathom what that was like for her.
Yeah, but the whole scenario with the years that she was there, I mean, there was so much that happened. I mean, she started with Diego as her caregiver, one of the zoo staff. The zoo decided they didn't want one of their staff taking care of her. So we hired Carolina and another guy whose name I would never remember. And then, so we had this other girl, and then Carolina left for a little bit, and then Kansu started after that, and then Carolina came back. And then we had another male caregiver who I can't remember his name either. I can only remember people's pets' names. I can't remember human names. Yeah.
He was so sweet. He was
actually great. And if she had been there longer, he would have been such a great caregiver for her. But the three of them ended up being her caregivers for the last bit of when she was there. So it was, I mean, this constant ebb and flow of training, retraining, having people from the U.S. go to train new staff, us going back to train new staff, me going back to train new staff and to take care of her because she wasn't doing well. And there weren't a lot of months that were super smooth in between all of that. And it is really, you know, we have frustrations here with what happens within the country and all of that stuff. And
the bureaucratic elements.
But it doesn't compare for me to the frustrations of trying to take care of an elephant that you can't hands-on take care of. And that, you know, all the photos that you can get, all the descriptions that you can get, all the videos, it's not the same as being able to see her in person. Because even with the one time where she looked really bad, and we thought, you know, because we already knew at that point that she had kidney disease, early stage kidney failure, you know, before that, and we figured her kidneys might be like on their last leg. And we went, and it was just that she wasn't getting enough food. And they had a listed diet and all of this other stuff. And it's just, sometimes it's not even that it's impossible to ask the right question, but it's sometimes people lose perspective when they see the same being day after day after day. It's hard to see the weight loss. It's hard to see the muscle loss. It's hard to notice that, you know, she went from having 12 boluses when she poops to having 4, which should have been an easier one because you have to clean up the yard. But thankfully, it was just that she wasn't getting enough food, and that was an easy adjustment, and she bounced back really quickly. But
even finding the food, you know, all the hay suppliers, and, you know...
It's actually easier, though, to get hay there than it was to get here. We had a much harder time getting grass hay here than we did in Chile.
But even some of that had the rye hay in it that she didn't like at all. You know, there's several things that had the mixed hay. The grass was, you know, was pretty looking, but she didn't eat it well because of certain not cross species, but multiple species of grass and different ratios.
She's a picky grandma. She's allowed to be a picky grandma.
But it's something that most elephants have proven not to like. You know, it's not just grandma said that they'd spray her hay with honey and all these things that we had to try and suggest. And, you know, it's sometimes difficult for new people, even here at the sanctuary sometimes, because we'll say, hey, you can try this, and you can try this, and you can try this. And they're like, yeah, we already tried those. And they're like, okay, but you need to try again. You know, just be more persistent and just keep experimenting until we find the right formula. And that formula may only work for a couple of days, and then you go back to the first thing you tried, and all of a sudden it starts working again.
And it's also hard, I think, for caregivers who have never worked with elephants before because they're so scared. And they know she's not well. You know, there is that fear of being worried that you're not doing enough or what you're doing isn't right. Or, you know, they
didn't want to do anything wrong either because they loved her so much.
But there are definitely a lot of insecurities that go along with all of that. So there were also a lot of conversations just about making sure that they felt better about where they were at personally with what was going on with her. It's, you know, it was a lot for them to have to deal with, you know, with so much of it being new and the scenario being far from ideal.
And not a nurturing environment either.
No.
You know, with that noise, with all the chaos of the safari park, just the nature of the safari park. I mean, we've talked about it before, and we'll talk about it again later in the subsequent episodes when we get to Mendoza. But even being at the Mendoza Zoo, you know, or Mendoza Eco Park, you know, in some of those environments, they're just harsh. It's just really hard, especially when you come from a more nurturing environment to go there. It's not easy to be in those spaces sometimes.
Especially the type of people that tend to want that kind of position and want to be an elephant caregiver. They are generally very much animal lovers. They tend to be a little more emotional or emotionally open. So, compounding everything, you put that type of personality, which is great, for working with elephants, but you put them in that kind of scenario, is a little bit of a mess.
Does sound like a very, very difficult situation. And at the same time, you were, after 3 years, if my maths is correct, after 3 years, you were then opening the gates to Guido and Maya in Brazil. You'd founded the sanctuary, and then you had, we mentioned that in the last episode, the difficulty of having to fundraise at the same time to be able to extend the yards to be able to take Ramba, because at that time you knew that she wasn't going to go to Tennessee. So it does sound like a very, very trying time for you as well.
I mean, the reality is we were...
As a young nonprofit.
I think I say the reality is. I think that needs to be like a drinking phrase.
Cheers!
Oh, good Lord. Never mind. I'm just going to stop talking. I am done. That's it for the episode.
What reality?
I don't know. I'm done. No, we were just so small at that point, and we didn't have money. I mean, initially it was 3 or 4 of us that did everything. Nobody was getting paid. We had a super small following. Most of our following was people that knew Scott from Tess and knew the type of person he was and wanted to support, whatever it was that he was doing, thankfully, because otherwise none of this would have gone anywhere. Mm-hmm. And you can only ask this small group of people who were so dedicated and would do anything they could, but you're not talking about $100, $1,000, $10,000. You're talking about truckloads of hay that are $30,000. And we need many, many, many of them.
Truckloads of steel.
Oh, sorry, truckloads of steel. We didn't, truckloads of hay. Oh my God, could you imagine if hay was that expensive? Sorry. So there's all that money. And then you're looking at the cost of a flight because we can't drive her over the Andes. So, you're talking about, we weren't even sure how much money at that point the flight was going to be. If we did a flight that was specifically for her and only her, it was super expensive.
But then we were also dealing with the airport issues when we started going down that road. All the logistics of what it's going to mean when all of this finally comes together. What is it going to take for that flight? Where can she fly into? What planes can land even in Cuiabá, the local airport? And then we found out planes can land in those type planes can land in Brasilia, but that's still a day and a half away driving. And then on top of that, the issue was with equipment to unload her. And so we started going down those channels, and we said, okay, well, there is somebody that has this equipment. It's going to cost this much. It's got to come from a different location and get there, and they have to shut down some sort of road to get this equipment there because of the size of it.
Essentially what it ended up being is she could fly into Brasilia, but we can't get her off the plane.
Yes.
It's that's not super useful. Thank you.
But those only answers come in that simple package.
No.
It comes after, 6 or 8 months of communication, and then finally someone comes along and is like, oh, by the way, it's not going to work. Again, if you don't have those answers right away, it's not as straightforward. So then we find out, where she can fly into. Actually, once we had all the equipment lined up, then we had the issue of they are not permitted and they don't have the people there that can file the paperwork for an animal import. And then that turned into...
So we're back to the Vogons.
Yes, totally.
We have, let's look at the airport. And they said, but then we can fly the people to Brasilia and they can be there to do the process. And then after we had that all lined, say, great, we're going to do Brasilia. Everything's lined up. And then we found out, again, that after we had worked on all these logistics for the equipment tent and load her, that there was another issue why it wasn't going to be available. So then we had to go back to an airport just outside of Sao Paulo, which is where most of animal imports fly in and out of. So they have the equipment, they have the logistics all set. But that ends up being another 2.5 hours. 2.5 days, sorry. 2.5 days of driving. So it's just a lot of things are going on during all that time without a lot of people trying to raise money, can't get the answers for where she's going to fly into, and therefore you can't get the quote for the plane.
And the thing is, people are trying, the reason you can't get the answers isn't, yes, it's negative in the fact that it takes months to figure these things out, but it's because people are actually really trying to be super helpful. They know that it's going to be better if she can fly into Brasilia. So they're trying to figure out every way possible to make it so that she can, because technically she can, but it's all of the pieces that need to be in place for that to happen that just couldn't happen. So it's not like people aren't answering. No. It's not like people are telling us things that aren't true. They're just trying so hard to make it work for us that it ends up actually being more hurtful than helpful.
And then you have the delays.
So did she fly into Sao Paulo then in the end, or was it Brasilia?
Just outside of Sao Paulo. And boy, do we have stories on that move. Because remember, just after the day after.
Yes, I do.
Okay, you're going to have to wait on that one.
We'll
more entertaining stories along the way.
That's actually entertaining.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's also
the fish
crazy.
House was, so try us, but not now, not today.
We'll wait till after the new year for that one. It's also, there's so many elements to it, as we are talking about, so many nuances. Drinking game, everybody take a chug.
Cheers, bingo.
There's just a lot of elements to it, as you know, Nadia. And then, some of those quotes or some of the answers, they'll say, well, if you let us know when she's going to be coming, then we can let you know what we can do. Like, well, first we have to know where she can go. We're still waiting on the permits, and we can't just keep waiting until we get the permits and then start all this process. We have to have it all going sequentially. And, with the unknowns that exist, let's get as much as we can. Meanwhile, Ramba's in Chile, going through cold winters.
And you tried
summers.
You tried to get us a free plane ride, but the bouncers said no.
Which one was this?
When you were in Colombia.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
So we had some connections with somebody that had a plane and a large cargo plane. I don't know ultimately if it would have worked, but they had a cargo plane that was very similar to what we ended up using. And there was an event in Colombia, and I was invited to that to try to meet with them. And on the day that I was supposed to meet with them, my plane ended up being delayed to get there. And by the time I got there, he was already moved on. It's a pretty famous person. He's surrounded by all kinds of, security guards. And there was an event. He was actually speaking at a roundtable event. And then I said to one of the bouncers, one of the security guards, I said, I was supposed to meet with him yesterday. This is who I am. I said, you know this guy. And, the middle person, the contact that I had, he wasn't available at that moment because he was occupied with other people that he was meeting with. And I said, is there a way that when he gets off this round table, can I just walk with him? And he said, you can, but he said, see the big guy behind him? He will take you out. He said, South America is crazy about this guy. I mean, South Americans are fanatical about this person's music. And they said they don't let anybody close. And he said, I've seen what happens when people come close. And he said, you don't want to be that person. So that I lost that opportunity to have that conversation. But it was worth the trip. It was almost an opportunity to get a free trip, but not at the expense of being taken out by a very large, person doing bouncer doing his job to protect, doing what he's supposed to be doing is protect a famous person. So it didn't work out to have that conversation, but another step in the process.
So close.
So there are special companies that do cargo shipments, and Was this then very unusual for them to fly out an elephant? Because you said that most animal transports did come into Sao Paulo.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely do. Yeah, and the company we ended up going with is a transport company. It's a cargo company, Atlas Air, and they fly cargo in and out of South America to North America on a regular basis. That process, there's multiple elements to it. There's the permit process. There's the logistics because of the size. There's the logistics because of endangered species. And then dealing with all of the elements that we're dealing with of the unknowns that existed. So many times you can hire companies to do this and do all of that for you. But
for millions of dollars that we did not have.
And we have seen that before, where you hire a company and they take care of all those logistics, but it is hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases. And
yeah, I mean, I thought the individual flight, if she was going by herself alone, was $700,000.
Yeah.
And that was with us doing all the legwork. So, I mean, it's got to cost more than that.
Oh my
So
God.
that was the other element, is if you get a private plane to fly into, and there was a type of private plane that could have landed in Cuiabá, which is not that far away, and we could have found a way to unload her by bringing in special equipment to make that happen. But that was going to be a $800,000 flight. Versus $100,000 to land 2.5 days away. Clearly, it would have been better to land in Cuiabá, the local airport, even in Brasilia, but not, $700,000 in difference. It is.
And we're not saying this because we're an organization who has that money and doesn't want to spend it on their elephants or, is trying to keep it in savings or anything like this. We were talking about, we did a fundraiser for her entire rescue that I think was about $225,000 with everything said and done. Maybe I would have to check my numbers, but it took months to raise this money. And I don't mean like 2 months. I think we had a fundraiser probably going for maybe 7 months or so to raise this money. And we needed to raise that money because we did not have it in the bank, and it's not the same. But with the expansion that we needed to do, essentially, anytime we were over the amount of money that it costs for a truckload of steel, that money got wired to Brazil. We brought a truckload of steel.
Yeah, it was all the things happening at the same time to make it all work.
So we didn't have $700,000 in the bank to use. We gladly would have paid whatever if we had it to get her here. But, as a very young and very small organization, we didn't have it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, like I said, even the $250,000 was really difficult for us to raise, even though we had supporters who, all they wanted in life at that point seemed to be to get Ramba here. There's still a limited amount of people that don't have millions of dollars in their bank account either. So we would have done it if we could.
It's a challenge. That's part of the struggle in the early years as a small organization. We've talked about it before. It's all those things happening simultaneously and working at all these contacts and all the different bureaucratic processes. And it's not easy. But it also, during this time, and to go back to Ramba for a minute and what it was like for her and her caregivers, I remember, her being her chinky grandma self and manipulating the caregivers a little bit. They were working on doing footwork with her, and they would ask her to present her foot so they could do footwork on her, and she wouldn't lift up her foot high enough, which is
her back foot,
which is like 30 centimeters off the ground to put it on the bar. It's not really high. And the caregivers, because they adored her so much and they overprotected her so much to a fault, which is beautiful. She definitely was well nurtured and she can't do it. She's too old. She can't lift her foot up that high. And then, that same day after you get those WhatsApp messages through WhatsApp that Ramba can't do this, then they send a video of her out playing in the mud. Her back feet are like way up in the air. She's kicking at the sky. It's like, no, look, guys, look what your grandma's doing who can't lift her feet up very high. It's like, she's manipulating us. It's like, yes. But, that's cheeky grandma. She was always cheeky Ramba grandma. And, they just loved her to no end. And, as difficult as all that time was and all the struggles that they had there on a daily basis and all the things that we were working through, she had a really, really beautiful team. taking care of her, even with the people in and out and the different people that come and go, and for various reasons. Sometimes the pressure was just not pressure. The struggles there was too much.
Yeah.
And people needed to step away from that environment a little bit, and then and then come back. But even with all of that, Ramba was just a rock star. I mean, she just stayed strong and pure and cheeky and smiley and all those things that she was. And we're grateful because her spirit is what carried her through.
And you did pull it off in the end. You fundraised. You got her the money to fly her out from Chile to Brazil. You fundraised to extend the yard so that you could meet the requirements that that Brazil had given you on the sanctuary. As I think you said in the other episode that you had protocols given to you that most zoos wouldn't have been given regarding size. So you had to expand to be able to accept your third elephant. So that's amazing. Cheers, that's another one of our words, that you pulled it off.
Yeah, I mean, you say we pulled it off. I mean, Nadia, you've been here from the get-go and from before the get-go. And, so it's not us pulling it off, it's we have pulled it off. It's everyone who has been contributing and all those followers who trusted at the very beginning and helped out. And everyone
we also
who was...
had the big Bob Barker donation to help finish up that section.
Yeah, earlier on with the first phases of development, Bob Barker and DJ&T Foundation really helped out a lot. And so it's so many pieces that come together, and we talk about the struggles. And I think just to put those struggles in perspective a little bit, we share them, that this is not just a walk in the park. But at the same time, it is absolutely amazing and beautiful and astounding how it all comes together. And I said amazing again. Everyone take a shot.
And beautiful. Cheers. Bingo. Hey, you got them.
2 in 1.
So it's just amazing to be... Sorry, I didn't mean to keep saying this. It's astounding to watch it all come together. We have too many keywords now. And for everyone that's here, following and listening and joining the journey, it's just, we're so grateful for everybody that's been, a part of it to make it all happen.
Yeah, this isn't to, sit here and complain about everything. A big part of it is just trying to share what the reality of what happened is, throughout the years on social media and so on. You can only share so much. I mean, our posts are already very wordy. We can't help it without things being 10 pages. And sometimes in the moment, not being able to go into, things that are going on with the government without insulting the government and then causing more problems, and, things going on with the safari park without insulting the safari park and having them kick Ramba out of her only home. There's a lot we can't talk about, and we do talk about the lovely, the positive, how phenomenal the girls are, but it's usually the other side that we aren't able to talk about in the moment.
There was even talk in the middle of all of that because of some of the issues that were going on, if we had to move her from the safari park to another temporary location. There's a lot of elements.
So yes, we've got about 3 minutes left, so we can move that to our next episode and talk about the preparations that Ramba had to undertake, health and medical checks, I can imagine, for her to be able to fly to Brazil. And so what are you doing for the rest of the day?
Oh, we have a huge project going on, a fun project. I shouldn't say huge. It's been a big project for a couple of days.
You should just say a fun project. You've been having nightmares about this project for the past 3 nights.
I have, but it's not that big of a project.
Not that he wanted me to share that, but there you go.
There's been urgency.
You can cut it out.
There's been urgency to get this flight cage done, but we wanted to do a flight cage for some time for larger birds, and we just got a call about an highly endangered Chaco eagle, and a juvenile, and he'll be coming probably on Monday. And so we have a very large flight cage that we've been building expeditiously over the last 5 days, and the guys have been working nonstop, and it's really going to be a nice, huge addition to our wildlife care program.
It's our side hustle that we make no money off of.
We can talk more about wildlife in the next episode too, Nadia, because it's an exciting part about what we get to do. It's an exciting part of what we get to do here, and how we can help and how we can contribute. Okie
dokie. Then I'll let you two go. I was going to say busy bees or busy birds that you are. So have a great day, and don't have too many sleepless nights or nightmares with your flight cage project. And we'll catch up then for our next recording in a couple of days.
Very good, Nadia. Thanks again for everything. We appreciate you being here.
Talk later. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so that's all that we have time for this week, unfortunately. But if you have subscribed to the podcast, which we hope you have, you will be notified automatically by your app when a new episode is out. And do check out Global Sanctuary for Elephants' brand new merchandise shop, where you can buy the Sip, Rumble, Repeat podcast mug we just talked about. Until next time, take care and thank you for being with us.